Hello and welcome to Dusklore, where some of the darkest stories get a voice. Today we'll be covering original, creepy camping stories. Before that, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. And if you like what we do here, consider checking out our Patreon. Subscribers get early access to every video and some exclusive content too. With that out of the way, please enjoy today's stories. I always thought I'd be the last one to agree to something like that. A camping trip, that is. No signal, no stores, no backup plan. Just 5 adults and a weekend in the woods trying to chase some fading nostalgia. But Rob had been pushing for it ever since he moved back to Vermont. And the rest of us, Ruby, Jess, Mason, and me, we didn't have a real reason to say no. The plan was simple. 1 car, 3 nights, Green Mountain National Forest. Deep enough that the only trails were the ones we made ourselves. We parked the car near an old fire service road and hiked in for over 3 hours before settling on a clearing tucked between a hill and a long stretch of trees. No one said it, but I think we all felt the weight lift a little when we got there. No traffic, no drama, no obligations, just quiet. The first night was uneventful. We set up tents, cracked a few beers, and passed a Bluetooth speaker back and forth like we were teenagers again. The air smelled like pine and smoke, and the stars were so bright it was almost unsettling. "Feels good, right?" Rob said, poking at the fire. "Just us in the woods, like old times." I nodded. It did feel good. That's what scared me. I've learned to trust that feeling, the quiet before something breaks. On the second day, we hiked northeast to a small creek Mason found on the map. Ruby carved notches in a few trees to mark the way. Jess laid a trail of river rocks leading back to the camp. We joked about survival shows and bear attacks on the way back, not realizing that that was the last time any of us would laugh. Dusk settled fast that evening. The trees swallowed the sun before it reached the ridge, and the fire didn't seem to burn quite as bright. That's when we heard twigs snap at the edge of camp. We thought maybe it was a deer or maybe just the wind. But then he stepped into the firelight, barefoot, gaunt, and staring. A man, alone, maybe 40, eyes too wide, smile too slow. Not a single word until Mason stood up and asked if he needed help. "Which one of you is willing?" he asked, and then he laughed, just once. A soft, breathless thing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke, and when we looked back up, he was gone. We didn't talk much that night, just zipped our tents shut a little earlier than usual and let the fire burn itself out while we listened for footsteps that never came. I think all of us expected to wake up to find a shoe missing or tent slashed or some weird symbol drawn in the dirt. But when morning came, everything looked exactly as we'd left it. All except the pile of stones. Someone, or something, had taken Jess's trail markers and stacked them in a near-perfect spiral, just 10 feet from the fire pit. She didn't say anything, just stared at them for a while before knocking them over like it was some dumb prank. But it wasn't. The extra water bottles we'd stashed under the tarp, gone. 2 bags of trail mix, torn open and dumped out in the fire pit. Ruby's lighter, Jess's flashlight, the extra set of batteries from my pack, all vanished. We argued, of course. Accusations, nervous laughter, someone trying to make it a joke. "Maybe a raccoon learned how to unscrew bottle caps," Mason said, trying to lighten the mood. Nobody laughed. Around noon, we decided to hike back to the creek, maybe refill, maybe reset, retrace our steps. But something was off about the trail. The trees felt closer somehow. The sun filtered through weird angles and like it was already late afternoon. Ruby's notches were gone. Every tree was smooth and untouched. Jess's rocks weren't just gone. They were replaced with pine cones, arranged in a row that pointed back towards the camp. Back, not forward. That's when we realized we weren't making any progress. Every direction we tried curved somehow, like we were walking in circles through a forest that was shifting just enough to confuse us. By the time we stumbled back into the clearing, it was almost dark. None of us had spoken in nearly an hour. The mood shifted from tense to exhausted. That kind of quiet where fear gives up and settles into something duller, heavier. I offered to take first watch. No one argued. I sat by the fire, trying not to let the shadows behind the trees creep too far into my thoughts. Just me and the flames and the feeling that someone was watching from beyond the light. Around midnight, I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, reflections catching in the firelight. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, there was nothing. But the fire had dimmed, and in the ash where the spiral had been, there was a single word drawn in soot. Willing? I didn't wake the others. I wanted to. I should have. But something about that word in the ashes felt like a warning more than a message. I threw on more wood and sat there in silence until the sun came up, not blinking, not moving, afraid that if I looked away, the message would change. By morning, the soot was scattered, no sign of the word, no sign of anything really. But the unease hadn't left, it just dug deeper. Mason suggested we leave, not in a panicked way, more like someone quietly acknowledging that a joke had gone on too long. We retrace our path, he said. Follow the sun, hike until we hit road. It sounded good in theory, but when we packed our gear, we found someone had slashed Mason's tent and soiled his sleeping bag. Our food was mostly intact, but someone had taken the time to carve little lines, tally marks, into every granola bar, every can of beans, every bottle. 5 tallies, over and over, etched with something sharp. Ruby broke down crying, just snapped at her for wasting energy. Rob just stood there, holding one of the cans in his hand like it might explain itself if he stared long enough. I suggested we pick a direction and just walk. So we did. East, we thought. But the sun felt strange, higher than it should have been, the shadows too short for the time of day. We walked for hours, pausing only once to drink from a creek that none of us remembered seeing before. By the time we reached a small ridge, we thought we'd made progress. But there it was. Our camp. Exactly as we'd left it. Same fire pit, same tents, same spiral pine cones, restacked somehow. We went in a loop, Rob muttered. That's all. A big, dumb loop. But I don't think any of us really believed that. That night, we kept the fire burning. None of us slept. Ruby started whispering around midnight. Not to us, just under her breath. The same phrase, over and over again. I'm not willing. I'm not willing. I'm not. She wouldn't stop. Jess eventually took her into one of the tents to calm her down. Around 3 a.m., Mason tapped my shoulder and pointed towards the woods. Figures, barely visible, maybe 10 of them, all standing between the trees. Still, painted, silent. One of them stepped forward. It was the man from before. Same 2 wide eyes, same thin smile. Which one of you is willing? He asked again. Nobody answered. Not out loud. He didn't speak again after that. Just stood there in the firelight, breathing slowly, like he had all the time in the world. The others behind him began to move, not toward us, but around, fanning out in silence, their painted faces catching glints of amber light between the trees. That's when the chanting started. Low, rhythmic, wordless. Not angry, not threatening, but certain. Like it was something they'd done before. Ruby came out of her tent, eyes glassy, arms limp at her sides. Just grabbed her, tried to pull her back, but Ruby didn't resist, didn't even blink. She just stepped towards the fire. I think I understand now, she said. Her voice was hollow. Not scared, not brave, empty. Mason moved before the rest of us could. He grabbed Ruby by the shoulders, started shaking her, yelling at her to snap out of it. Just as he grabbed her, they rushed us, fast, coordinated, like they knew exactly who to grab, and when. Mason went down first, two of them pinning him face first into the dirt, another holding his legs. Jess screamed and swung a stick like a baseball bat, but missed. And someone caught her by her wrist so hard I heard it pop. I turned to run, and so did Rob, but we collided, panicked and disoriented. I don't know who screamed, maybe it was me, but I ducked low and sprinted for the woods. I didn't look back. The air was thicker in the trees, like breathing in syrup. Every step was a guess, every branch a trap. Behind me, I heard Rob crashing through the brush, gasping, muttering something under his breath like a prayer he didn't believe in. Then a sound, like wet cloth hitting a stone, and he was gone. I didn't call for him, I just kept running. The chanting behind me faded, but I could still hear it in my head, steady, inhuman, etched into the inside of my skull. I ran until my lungs gave out and my legs folded under me. When I finally opened my eyes, I was alone. No camp, no trail, no sign anyone had ever been here at all. I don't remember finding the road. I just remember headlights, cold gravel under my hands, a woman's voice asking if I was okay. I think I said yes, but I wasn't. The rangers called it exposure, said I must have wandered off the trail and panicked when I couldn't find my way back. They searched the forest for 6 days. Dogs, drones, dozens of volunteers combing every inch of that area in Green Mountain. They didn't find a single trace of the others. No torn tents, no dropped gear, no footprints, nothing. Just me. In a spiral of pine cones near where I was found. I told them what happened. I told them everything. The man, the question, the painted faces, the chanting, the way the woods folded in on us like a trick of the mind. They nodded politely, took notes, suggested I speak to someone. I did. A therapist. A few, actually. Every time I told the story, it felt thinner. Like I was retelling a dream I couldn't quite remember, but couldn't stop living in. Ruby, Mason, Jess, Rob. Their families wanted answers. I didn't have any. All I had was that question. Which one of you is willing? I still hear it sometimes. Not out loud, but in the back of my mind, like a wound that never healed right. I tried to go back once, 6 months after it happened. Parked at the same turnout, followed what I thought was the same fire road. I made it about 30 yards in before the birds stopped singing. The air went still. The shadows shifted. And I turned around. Because I knew in my bones, that if I stepped even 1 foot further, I'd never come back. That was 3 years ago. I moved states, changed jobs, tried to build something like a normal life again. But sometimes, just before dawn, I'll dream of the clearing, the fire still burning, the spiral intact, and someone standing at the edge of the light, smiling. Which one of you is willing? Not me. Not this time. Not ever again. The drive into Allegheny was long enough to quiet the city in our bones. By the time we hit the dirt road that curved toward our campsite, I could already feel the static of work stress and half-finished home projects flickering out behind us. We'd made it. A decade. 10 years of dinners, of arguments, of falling asleep to the same sights and ceiling shadows. This trip was our gift to each other. No cell service, no distractions. Just a rented SUV, a week's worth of supplies, and enough space to remember how to be quiet together. "This is perfect," Marissa said, that little half-smile pulling at her mouth as we set up camp. "Exactly what I needed." I agreed. We didn't say much after that, just went about our routines, tent, firewood, cooler, chairs, familiar rhythms. The air was cooler than expected for late summer, and the trees above moved with the kind of hush that only comes from being miles from anything. At night, we read by flashlight and listened to insects thrum just outside the mesh walls. We laughed more than I thought we would. By day 3, I'd started to forget what day it was. That's when we found it. Nailed high to the trunk of a pine, just off of our clearing, maybe 30 feet up, was a wooden figure, hand-carved, slender. Its arms bent backwards, splintered at the elbows. I figured some backwoods artist had strange tastes. Maybe a warning from a hunter, maybe nothing. "It's not nothing," Marissa said, quieter than usual. I let her be. She went for a walk and came back with less color in her face. We didn't talk about the effigy again. The next morning, our cooler was gone. Not moved, just gone, vanished like we'd never brought it. I searched the perimeter while Marissa packed what dry goods we had left. Her eyes kept flicking towards the trees like she expected them to blink. "It was there last night," she said, flat. I nodded. I remembered filling it with ice from the last of the freezer packs. I remembered closing the lid, locking it. There weren't any animal prints, no drag marks, just a dead patch of pine needles where it used to sit. Soon after, we started hearing the movement. Not wildlife, not wind. It was low, deliberate. Footsteps through brush. 2 steps, pause. 3 more, then silence. We didn't see anyone, but we both felt it. How the forest felt quiet. How each sound seemed a touch too intentional. "We should go," Marissa said, standing straight up, arms crossed tight. I didn't disagree, but I didn't say yes either. Maybe I didn't want to admit that the trip was turning, that our perfect escape was fraying. We agreed to leave in the morning. I told her we'd pack at first light, follow the route back out, and stop for breakfast on the way. That night, I went to collect firewood alone. I didn't go far, maybe 40 yards. Just enough to get dry sticks from the downed birch we'd found on the second day. The woods felt narrower now, like the trees had leaned in just a little closer. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was watchful. I never made it back to camp. When I didn't return, Marissa waited. 10 minutes became an hour, the sun dipped below the ridge, and the cold set in early. She says she called out for me, that she followed my trail for a while before it simply ended. No scuff marks, no fallen branches, no blood. She stayed up all night, flashlight gripped like a weapon, afraid to sit with her back to anything. When the sun rose, I still wasn't there. Then she found the camcorder. Not outside, not buried, just there, sitting neatly on the floor of the tent, angled slightly towards the door. Still warm. She recognized it. It was ours. The one from our honeymoon, long since broken, stuffed in a closet back home. And yet, here it was. Clean, functional, battery at 72%. She picked it up with a towel, didn't press any buttons, not yet anyway. The woods were dead quiet when she finally played it back. The first frame was shaky, low light, just breathing. Not panicked breathing, controlled, like someone holding the camera against their chest, breathing through their nose. Then footsteps, one at a time. The view bobbed with the rhythm, up a ridge, down a slope, then towards a clearing. Our clearing. Marissa watched herself in the distance, sitting by the fire, alone. She hadn't known she was being filmed. Then came my voice, muffled, pleading, off camera. "Please don't." A thud, then another, then a dragging sound that went on too long. The camera shifted wildly, cutting to trees, dirt, darkness, then settled again, on a man. His boots were worn to the sole, pants frayed at the edges, one arm tucked close to his side like it didn't work properly anymore. He didn't speak, just breathed, heavy and slow, watching the camera lens like it was a mirror. The last thing it recorded was him turning the camera toward a pine trunk, then stepping out of frame. A wooden effigy, identical to the one from earlier, hung there. This one with its legs bent backwards. Marissa didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just packed. It took her 12 minutes. Tent, bag, flashlight, knife. The keys weren't in the car. The glove box was open, the map gone. Every drawer and compartment had been emptied, laid out like someone had taken inventory. She took off on foot. Didn't follow the road. Followed the sun. Kept west, avoided paths, avoided clearings. But even then, she says she never felt alone. Every time she paused, the world paused with her. When she stopped, it stopped. When she walked, it followed. By nightfall, she found a ranger station, locked, boarded up, overgrown. Nothing inside but a desk, some old maps, and a working radio. She tried to call for help. No response, just static. She didn't sleep that night, just sat with her back to the corner of the cabin, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. The light died sometime past midnight. The batteries had been full. She said the dark felt layered. Not just absence of light, but something more dense, like it had mass. Somewhere during the night, a knock came. On the window, not the door. 3 soft taps, then nothing. Then 3 again, a little louder. Then again, impossibly loud. Not fists, knuckles. Bare, slow, and intentional. She moved without thinking, threw open the back door and ran. She followed the tree line until she could barely stand, until her throat was raw and the knife felt like lead. No signs of pursuit, no signs of life, just woods, deep and endless. And then, there it was. A flashlight, half buried in the leaves. Hers. Next to it, a folded piece of paper, torn from the map, written in neat, deliberate strokes. You're not supposed to be here without him. She stayed where she was, staring at the paper until morning light bled through the branches. She didn't run again, just sat there, shivering in the dew, waiting to be found. And eventually, she was. A pair of hikers spotted her kneeling in the brush, cradling something in her arms they couldn't quite see. She was dehydrated, drenched in sweat, mud to her elbows. When they asked what she was holding, she just shook her head and whispered, "It's our anniversary." They said she was in shock. Local authorities chalked it up to exposure, disorientation, maybe a scare that led to panic. No signs of foul play, no signs of me. The campsite had been cleared, every trace of them gone. No tent, no bags, not even footprints in the loam. Just one thing left behind. A carved wooden effigy nailed to a tree, just past the clearing. This one small and featureless, but painted faintly with what looked like blood. Arms and legs missing. When Marissa was well enough to speak, she told them about the man, about the camcorder. They humored her, searched the woods for 3 days, brought in dogs and everything. No footage was ever found. The camcorder had vanished. But they did find me, barely alive with 2 broken legs. I wasn't conscious for the majority of what happened to me, so I relied mostly on Marissa's account. It took months of hospital visits and PT to stand on my own again, and I will walk with a limp for the rest of my life. But I made it, at least. Now, every year on the same day, a wooden effigy shows up somewhere in Allegheny, always small, always broken. Sometimes nailed high where no ladder could reach, sometimes left at trailheads. Once on the hood of a parked ranger's truck. No fingerprints, no tool marks, just those same backwards limbs. They think it's kids, locals, some cult nonsense or forest myth recycled by bored teenagers. But even now, sometimes, just before sleep, when the trees outside are quiet and the power flickers with no cause, I still think about that man in the woods. I'd been camping solo for years, usually up in the high country, where the trails vanish into pine and the world gets real quiet around sunset. This trip was no different, just me, my truck, and a full pack of gear I knew better than most people. I'd followed a narrow service road about 20 miles past where the asphalt ended, into a part of the national forest that hadn't seen fresh tire tracks in months. No marked campsites out there, just cold dirt, wind-stressed trees, and sky. I set up camp a little before dusk, wedging my tent between two thick, old-growth trunks with a decent view of the slope below. Nothing fancy, just a fire ring, a tarp, and some quiet. It was supposed to be a reset, 3 days, maybe 4. No alerts, no phone calls, no people. Just my own thoughts and the sounds of the forest. First night went smooth. I even let the fire burn out naturally and slept hard, lulled by the distant hoots of owls and the occasional creak of trees swaying in the dark. The second morning, I decided to explore a bit. I followed the tree line west, winding past gnarled brush and old animal trails, until the ground sloped steeply downward into a shallow basin I hadn't seen on the map. At the center of that basin was a pit. It looked like a sinkhole at first, about 15 feet wide, ragged at the edges like the earth had been ripped open instead of worn down. No slope to it, just a sheer drop, clean and sharp. I kicked a rock into it and waited. No sound came. Must be deep, I muttered, peering over the edge and squinting, but even in daylight, it was just black. No moss on the walls, no soil erosion, and no plants clinging to the edge. Just a perfectly round mouth gaping open in the middle of nowhere. I marked the location on my notepad map and walked a wide circle around it. No footprints or animal scat, and no birds overhead. Nothing. I stayed for maybe 20 minutes, mostly out of curiosity, before heading back to camp with that strange silence following me. That night, the woods didn't sound the same. No wind or bugs, and no distant coyotes. Just the soft crackle of my fire and low hum of my own thoughts. Probably just the weather, I said to myself. But even my voice sounded too loud in the stillness. I turned in early, a little uneasy, but still rational. I'd seen oddities out here before. Bad air pockets, geothermal vents, collapsed mine shafts. I zipped the tent shut, pulled the sleeping bag over my shoulders, and tried not to think about how odd the pit had looked. Just dirt, just shadow, nothing else. But sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of something moving just outside the tent. The sound wasn't loud, just a soft scrape, like someone dragging their fingers across fabric. My eyes opened slowly. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The noise came again, slower this time, as if whatever it was had nothing better to do. I reached out for the hatchet beside my sleeping bag and stayed still, letting the silence stretch. After a minute, the sound stopped. No footsteps or anything, just stopped. I waited a while longer before unzipping the tent halfway and peeking out. Nothing moved outside. The fire had gone cold, casting the camp in a dull gray outline under the moonless sky. But the stillness wasn't natural. I stepped out in just my socks, the cold dirt biting into my feet, and swept the area with my flashlight. No tracks and no sign of any animal, but the entire clearing felt stripped, like something had passed through and the world had recoiled. Even the air smelled different, less like pine and more like chemicals. I circled the site, then turned my beam toward the tree line. It was then that I noticed the branches. They were bent, each one pointing ever so slightly towards the pit. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, the forest didn't wake up. Still no birds, still no bugs. Still no scurrying squirrels or snapping twigs. Just a hollow, quiet, so thick I felt it in my chest. I thought about packing up, about driving back to the ranger station to report the pit, but part of me felt pinned here, like I wasn't finished. I returned to it mid-morning. The hole hadn't changed, but the ground around it had. There were drag marks now, thin, parallel lines on the soil, leading to the edge like something had been pulled in. I crouched down, ran a gloved hand over them. Whatever made those marks had claws, 3 on each side, spaced wide. Too wide for a raccoon, too narrow for a bear, too deep to be the wind. I stood and kicked another rock in. Again, no sound. But this time, the forest responded. The trees behind me swayed gently, not with wind, but like something was brushing past them. I turned fast, hatchet in hand. Nothing. Just the trees. I backed away slowly, never turning my back to the pit until I was out of the basin and halfway back to camp. I told myself I wouldn't go back, but that night, just after dusk, I heard something moving outside, again. Not an animal, not the wind. It was big and close. And it was coming from the pit. I didn't run. I should have, maybe, but I didn't. I just stood there, in the dark, with my hand frozen around the zipper of the tent, listening to the sounds. I heard a new sound, like something massive was breathing slowly through a narrow opening. In, pause, out. The fire had died again, and I hadn't relit it. I don't think it would have helped. Whatever was out there wasn't afraid of light. I grabbed my boots and slipped them on, one at a time, barely lacing them. Then the headlamp, then the hatchet, then the big flashlight. I crept out of the tent and swept the clearing again, my breath catching when the beam passed the path I'd taken that morning. A new set of marks had appeared. They started right behind my tent. 3 thin grooves, carved into the pine needles and dirt, angled towards the trail, and downhill, toward the pit. I didn't make a sound, I just followed. The forest felt compressed, like the air had thickened and gravity was trying harder than usual. Every step I took seemed too loud. Every branch I passed seemed to move out of the way. When I reached the edge of the basin, I stopped short. The pit was glowing. Not bright, not fire, just lit. A faint blue radiance pulsed up from its depths like bioluminescence trapped underwater. And that was the first time I felt it. Heat. Not from the glow, but from the ground. Faint, like standing over a vent. The drag marks went right to the edge and vanished. I circled once more, slow, steady, careful. Still no footprints. I should have gone back. I should have packed up and left right then. But I didn't. I stared down into the pit, trying to make sense of it, when the glow pulsed again, and the light caught something. A handprint. Just one, pressed into the far wall of the pit about 10 feet down, clinging to sheer rock, like it had been seared there. Almost human-looking. Bare, slightly too long in the fingers. I took a single step back, breath shallow, when something rustled behind me. The next thing I remember is the force. Something slamming into me from the side. Something cold and fast and strong. I hit the dirt hard. My flashlight flew from my hand and landed sideways, illuminating nothing but the grass. I scrambled, tried to crawl, tried to see what had hit me. But then I felt it. Fingers. They closed around my ankle and yanked. My head hit the ground and everything went black. I came to in darkness. Not the kind your eyes adjust to. This was deeper. My body ached, my back, my shoulder, the side of my face where I must have landed. Dirt packed into my mouth. My left leg was slick with something wet, but not bleeding. I reached around slowly. My pack was gone. Hatchet too. Only the headlamp remained, tilted awkwardly across my forehead and covered in grit. I flicked it on. I was underground. The ceiling above me rose like a cathedral of stone, jagged, pulsing faintly with that same blue glow I'd seen from the pit. I wasn't at the bottom. There was no bottom. Just a cavern wide enough to fit a building, with tunnels leading in every direction, carved smooth in some places, clawed open in others. The walls were slick, not with water, something else. I pulled myself upright and limped towards the nearest opening. The air was suffocating, like it pushed against me with every step. And the silence was unbearable, until it wasn't. A clicking sound started, sharp, fast, and multiplying, like insect legs tapping against rock, dozens at first, then hundreds. I backed against the wall and shut the lamp off. My breath sounded like thunder in the dark. Something passed by me in the tunnel, fast and low to the ground, all limbs and speed. But I didn't see it. I felt the air ripple as it moved. I waited a full minute before I dared to move again. No clue which direction I'd come from or if up was even an option anymore. I picked a tunnel and started moving. Left hand against the wall, right hand fumbling for purchase on anything in my way. The deeper I went, the louder the skittering got. Always behind me, never in view. I turned and pressed my back to the wall again, heart thudding. Every twist in the tunnel opened into more tunnels, some lined with claw marks, others packed with strange little totems made of bone and moss. Something rumbled loud. Not behind me, beneath me. The ground vibrated as if 1,000 limbs had just started running at once. I found a narrow passage and squeezed through, scraping my side raw on a jagged rock. And on the other side, daylight. A pale crack in the earth, far above, just a sliver. I climbed, scrambling, crawling, slipping on old moss and loose stone. I didn't think, I just moved. The skittering was closer now, louder and frenzied. Something grabbed my boot. I kicked hard enough to feel bone crack. But I didn't stop. One last push and I reached the surface, bursting from a cave mouth half hidden beneath a collapsed log somewhere higher on the ridge. The sky was pale orange, dusk again. I didn't know how long I'd been gone, but the forest looked different. Same trees, same clearing, same basin in the distance. But the pit was gone. I stood there for a long time, just trying to take it all in. The forest was still silent, no wind, no birdsong, but I knew it was still there. I limped back toward my camp, half expecting it to be ransacked, but everything was where I left it, tent still upright, fire pit cold, and my backpack leaning against a stump, like nothing had ever happened. I sat down slowly and checked my leg. No blood, nor any torn fabric, just a faint pressure, like something had held on too long. The ground was damp where I'd landed, and I found a smudge of blue residue near my boot. Same glow I'd seen in the cavern, but it didn't glow anymore. I packed everything and left within the hour. Didn't care about the route, didn't stop to mark the trail. Just walked until the trees looked normal again. When I reached my truck, I didn't even take off my pack. I drove until the road turned back to pavement, then farther. I didn't stop until I was 2 towns away, parked behind a gas station where the sky was stained yellow with light pollution. That night, I slept in the cab with the engine running and the dome light on. I didn't dream. It's been a few weeks since that trip. Went back to that ranger station 2 days ago. Said I'd been hiking near Pine Hollow Ridge and thought I'd seen signs of an old mine shaft collapsing. The ranger pulled out a few maps, scratched his beard, and shook his head. "Nothing out that way," he replied. "No pits, no mines. That whole basin's flat, been surveyed dozens of times." I didn't argue. I just thanked him and left. But I checked my notepad when I got home. The circle I'd drawn around the pit was still there, still marked in ink. I flipped the page, and there was another circle. Drawn sometime later, same ink, but I don't remember drawing it. And the label underneath it isn't in my handwriting. It just says, "Next." I don't know if I ever really climbed out of that place. I don't know if that forest ever really let me go. Or if I brought something back with me. Thank you for joining me on today's journey. If you enjoyed these stories, please click the like button, tap the subscribe button, and ring that bell. It helps us reach more people like you. And if you'd like more, our Patreon supporters get early access and exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Links in the description. There are always more dark stories to tell. I'll see you next time. Take care.